Welcome, mortals. Garlic, crosses, or the skin of a killer? Nope, we've got the history, fiction, and a real-life vampire outbreak. Join us as we dissect the myths and realities of vampires with a guest author and a shocking American story on the Parallax Podcast.
Hi, Willow.
Hello, Karissa. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I was hoping you could hear me on that one and we weren't having some technical difficulties caused by Michael.
It is his fault. He knows it.
All right. So we have a special guest on the podcast today, published author Miss Katherine Horsley, who has an amazing vampire series called the Soulless series. Welcome, Miss Katherine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So Katherine is a part of the Vendera publishing family as well, and she has released 4 of the 5, right, in her
Correct.
series? Okay, I was making sure. I was counting my shelf. I'm like,
Look over to the side. How many do I have?
right? In the spirit of our spooky season, we felt we needed to cover a true outbreak of vampires in history, even though there are several, and the origins of these immortal, blood-sucking beings that we tend to fall in love with on our bookshelves. But that meant we also needed to bring forth Katherine to share her fictional character, Nicholas Ryder, his vampire nature, and the research that she may or may not have done to create her books. For today, we're going to get started with Katherine, and then we're going to go down this little rabbit hole with Willow, who is going to give us an American town who was thought to have been overrun by vampires. And then we will close with the dark history of vampires and their tie to our favorite mother of all demons, Lilith.
So I guess I'll just jump in there.
Yes, Katherine, you're gonna jump in there and give us your story. Tell us what you want about your books, and then give us what you want about what you've prepared for today.
Okay, awesome. So my books are, like you said, a vampire series. Takes place over a few different centuries and follows Nicholas Ryder. He's a vampire through his life. I tell people it's kind of like if Anne Rice had wrote Vampire Diaries. So think about my knee. Sorry.
Yes.
Think like supernatural drama with action and violence and witty banter and adult content. There will be 5. You can get them on Amazon or
And
on
adult
Vendera's
content.
website.
Warning.
Yep.
Warning rules.
You know, lots of violence and lots of content. When I do research for vampires, I tend to do research for certain things. Like I'll look up just certain aspects on what's I'm kind of hung up on, but then I get kind of down rabbit trails and start looking up random vampire facts. So mine might be a little all over the place, but I'm hoping I have something that's new and exciting for the audience and for you guys. But basically, I really love vampires, and I love the more modern vampires that we all think of, you know, the aristocrat kind with the money and the looks and the intrigue. The kind everybody wants to be, and not like so much of the corpse-like demonic type.
Smelly kind.
Yeah, that's not where I write. I tend to write in the more modern vampires. And vampires have really infiltrated every kind of culture and aspect along time. Some of them are more like a demon to start with. But even in some of the kids shows, like The Count on Sesame Street, his obsession with numbers comes from vampire lore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one that we kind of forget about in modern vampires because it's not an attractive thing that we can want to be, is this obsession where vampires, if you scatter something like rice or rocks or something, they have a compulsion to count. So they will just stop chasing you and count. And we don't like to put that in our vampires because it makes them less like a superhero. They're a little obsessive compulsive with counting.
Yeah, they're like Rain Man.
Yes, but it is kind of fun to know that they're even on Sesame Street. And of course, most people think of Dracula as being the modern vampire kind of start, but it actually goes back a little farther than that. There were books out before that, like Vampire, which there's some conspiracies about who actually wrote that. There's Lord Byron, and then there's another author, Polidori, or it's probably mispronounced, but something like that. And there, he said and she said about whose idea it was, who wrote it.
Probably a woman.
Definitely a woman.
Yep, definitely a woman.
But and then there was a story, Carmilla, that came out before Dracula too. And in that one, they actually introduced more of the superpower type things. So vampire made them less animalistic, more aristocrat. Then Carmilla came out. They got super speed, super strength, things like that. By the time Dracula came out, Bram Stoker's Dracula, he kind of compiled all that together. His story was really successful. So it sort of helped form the base of what we have as vampires now. But there are stories where people say they have seen a vampire, or, there's vampire stories of where they come up from the dead and attack different villages and things. And especially in like Romania and stuff, you can see like some of the vampire graves that they find to try to keep people from coming back from the dead as a vampire. Vampires even made their way into the Bible. So, in Proverbs, it's a metaphorical book section of the Bible, but they do mention in there about a bloodsucker, a leech, having two daughters that say give, give. And it talks about their teeth. Let me find my note. Their teeth are swords and their jaws are set with knives to devour the poor. And I know it's metaphorical for greed, but I mean, you use a metaphor for things that are relevant, so that at least entails that at the time, talking about a blood-sucking leech that has teeth like razors and victimizes the poor and the innocent, it was a relevant thing to talk about at that time.
So how did you use any of this stuff for Nicholas? What did you pull?
So for him, I tried to just stick with the basics that people know about, like the garlic and the sunlight and things like that.
Did you do anything with, like, the salt water or any of that stuff where they can't cross salt water, or what other kind of
So
characteristics?
I did eliminate some of them that make my writing a challenge. Like, not gonna lie, I did take some of them out. Did take some of them out that would make things difficult. But you know, whenever you whenever I research some of the things that kind of make a vampire by today's standards, there are some even medical conditions that kind of mimic some of the symptoms, like blood drinking and photosensitivity and things. So I tried to make him, my vampire, sort of more realistic in that he could pass for an everyday human
Mhm,
and still have some of the kind of core things that they have to avoid.
mhm,
So I tried to keep it, as basic, the basic core stuff that fans can really get behind and really enjoy, but then, you know, pull back a little on some of it to keep him more human and more relatable. It is in first person. Nobody wants to read a story about a butcher through through his perspective. So, but yeah, mine's kind of all over the place because I don't, like I said, I don't really think linearly when I research. It
mhm.
just goes everywhere.
Like, almost like a murder board? Like, you got all these different connecting pieces?
Yes, and I'm like, this is relevant. It doesn't
Yeah.
match anything else, but it's neat. Look at this.
Yeah, but that's what's really cool about your vampire series is you take a different direction. 1, it is in first person, and 2, I
Mhm.
know that his name doesn't stay Nicholas Rider, correct? He's had different names?
He's had different names through pretty much all of the books. He keeps this name until the very end at the fifth book, just for consistency for the reader. He does refer to some of his previous names when he's talking, but his name stays the same for these books, just to make it simpler for people to read.
Yeah.
But it is first person through a male perspective, so
Right, which is
that's fun.
interesting that you took that, yes, and I know one of my friends, Christine, she doesn't read vampire books, but she really
Mhm.
loves your books. She
Yeah.
loves your books, so that's a shout out because it's usually not the type of thing that she typically reads, but she loves.
Mhm.
So do you have anything else you'd like to add about, like, your process with creating your vampire?
Well, when I write, it's kind of like my research. It's just sort of all over the place. And then I just sort of like I'll have like different little scenes popping in my head, and then I have to try to put them in a timeline that makes sense.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's kinda like you're just like you got your outline and then you just kinda figure out which chapter or whatever, which kinda would, like, line out properly, yeah, I feel like that's kinda how my notes go when I'm writing for the podcast or
Mhm.
anything in general. I'm like, okay, I'll put it out there, but I'm like, wait a minute, this one actually should come before this one. And you're like, that's why I like digital now. It's like, because I can shift it easier instead of erasing everything.
Yeah, right. But sometimes I just build a whole scene off of like one little quip. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
I have to put that somewhere. I have to make a
Hmm.
whole scene just for it so I can use it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Which I find it very interesting. Everybody's writing processes, how it comes together. Yes. So we'll talk about that at the end, how you can get Catherine's books, but hold for a second. We're going to pause because we just lost Willow.
Oh my gosh, Catherine, I want you to know the only reason why I wasn't saying anything was because I knew there was a delay.
Okay.
There was a Karissa.
So much
He
better.
just giggled. He just
So
giggled.
much. You're like so clear. Like this is good.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to start using Michael's computer then from now on. I'm just gonna use his computer because I just was hoping. I was sitting there being silent because I was like, if I talk, I know that there's a delay, and so it's gonna sound weird. And I was like, I also look weird because I'm looking at myself and you guys, but the camera's up here. And I was like, Catherine's gonna think that I'm a butthole because I'm
I
not
explain that you're
talking.
not. I explain that you're not.
Cool. I was like, she's gonna think that I'm like so mean because I'm not talking, and it's literally just because I know it'd be annoying for you to be like completely on a different subject. I'm just like, oh,
No, you're fine.
vampires, and you're talking about something completely different. I was like,
You probably would have just made me start talking about that subject all over again. I've been like, oh yeah, well, hang on a minute. I'm over here.
actually, now that you mentioned it.
Wait, there was something else about that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I'm making us like, I don't know. Are we restarting or are we just gonna
No,
continue?
we're here. We've been recording this whole time. I'm just gonna have to delete all of that's in the middle somehow. It's fine because I didn't
think
want to
you
lose
should-
everything she said.
I think you should keep some of it just for fun. So now that I'm, that I exist and am real again, how did we segue into me?
I don't remember. Well, do you have any questions for Catherine? Maybe pose something after some of the stuff that you heard about her
I
writing
didn't hear
process.
like the entire last part. Okay, well, I did hear what I did hear before everything went dark was
Such an irony with being a vampire episode.
yeah, see that you need to keep a little bit of that middle part in there for this specific reason. But what I did, part of what I heard before everything went dark was the writing process of you find like you get an idea of a scene that you want and you write it and then you're like, well, now I have to actually do something to make this make sense in the world that I've created. And I do that, but the way I do it, and I don't know, I'll bet that you probably do something like this. I'll be in the car or I'll be taking a shower or walking the dogs, like just every day-to-day thing. And I'll be like, this is a scene that I want. And I just think about it and like act it out in my mind. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then I sit there and I'm like, great, but how? Because
Yes, I do that.
I'm like, everything I've written is it's either like, oh, this is perfect, or I'm like, I want this scene that I've just thought of in the middle of the day and run through in my head, but it has nothing to do with where I actually stopped the last time I sat down and wrote.
I've created entire scenes while I'm mowing or anything, and then half the time I'll think of something like right before bed, and I'll just text it to myself so that it's all.
Oh yeah, she doesn't have an iPhone, so she doesn't have the Notes app. So
No, I know, and my Android has a Notes app, but I'm not good at using it.
Karissa, why did you invite this heathen on our podcast?
she must be the villain. You know that the villain always has a non-iPhone.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it
I'm
is.
from a rural Ohio, so we're about 10 years behind everybody else. I'll catch up to you guys eventually.
Hey, you know what? That's a great segue. You know what? Speaking of being about 10 years behind everybody, I have a spooky story for you.
Okay,
Are you guys ready for my spooky story?
We're ready for your spooky story.
I'm ready for my spooky story. I'm happy that now I'm not having a delay and we can actually I'm not having a Karissa.
I should be your only delay. I should be your only delay. All right, prepare for the spookiness.
The spooky. They say that vampires belong to the old world. Castles in Transylvania, fog-drenched streets in Europe. But what if I told you that America once had its own vampire panic? That deep in the quiet hills of Rhode Island, neighbors once dug up the dead, searching for the cause of a mysterious plague. This is a true story of Mercy Lena Brown, the last so-called vampire of New England. Yeah, exactly. I was about to do that. I had my hands up and everything. I was prepared. So our story takes us to Exeter, Rhode Island in the late 1800s. That might be Exeter, but I think it's Exeter. It was a small rural farming community not far from Providence. It was a cold, isolated place, and the families lived miles apart and the winters were long and unforgiving. When I was doing research on this little spot in Rhode Island was also about 10 years behind everybody. So that kind of sets the scene nicely for what's about to happen.
They're also using Android.
They are also using Androids. That's exactly what's going on right now. That's why they didn't know what was happening in the rest of the states. And during this 1800s Android user time, something was spreading, something the townspeople could neither see nor stop. And it wasn't a monster from folklore, it was tuberculosis, or as they called it then, consumption. The disease was slow and cruel. It drained the body, made its victims pale and gaunt, hollowed their eyes, and left them coughing up blood. And when they called it consumption, this was something that it was called throughout the United States before we actually figured out what was going on. To those who didn't understand it, like these android-using Rhode Islanders, it looked like something or someone was feeding on them from the inside. In 1882, the disease came for the Brown family. George Brown was a simple farmer. His wife, Mary Eliza, was the first to fall ill. Then, a few years later, their eldest daughter, Mary Olive, also died of consumption. By 1891, the disease struck again. This time, Mercy Lena Brown, just 19 years old, and her older brother, Edwin. At this time, too, the rest of the United States has an understanding of tuberculosis. These vampire things we're about to talk about really was mostly in New England, in these really small towns where everybody was kind of spread out and they didn't really catch on to the whole, science of things. Yeah, they had terrible Wi-Fi, actually. That's exactly what's going on. Incorrect. Edwin Brown had moved away to Colorado Springs, hoping that the dry mountain air would heal him. But when his sister Mercy fell sick, he returned home, weak, pale, and gasping for breath. By now, Exeter was gripped by fear. Consumption was ravaging family after family, and no one understood why. Doctors offered little hope. Medicine was primitive, germ theory was still new, and antibiotics didn't exist. So the townspeople turned to folklore. They began to whisper, maybe one of the dead isn't really gone. Maybe, they said, a vampire was rising from its grave, feeding on the living, slowly draining their life away. And when Edwin grew worse, people began to suspect that someone from the Brown family, perhaps his recently deceased sister Mercy, was to blame. On March 17th, 1892, a small group of neighbors gathered in the Brown family cemetery. The ground was frozen, and the snow clung to the bare trees as they began to dig. First, they exhumed the bodies of Mary Eliza and Mary Olive. Both were little more than bones, exactly what you'd expect after so many years in the earth. But when they opened Mercy's coffin, the crowd gasped. She had died 2 months earlier. Her body looked strangely preserved. Her skin was still intact. Her hair seemed longer. Her cheeks still had color. And when they examined her chest, they found something chilling. Liquid blood in her heart. Mercy Brown, they decided, was the vampire draining the life from her brother. They removed her heart and burned it on a nearby rock. The ashes were then mixed with water and given to Edwin to drink, a desperate attempt to cure him. But it didn't work because Edwin died 2 months later.
Yes, because ashes don't cure tuberculosis.
No. So I remember telling Karissa about this when we were on the way to the store. I don't know what we were getting, but it was probably something for Boo at the zoo, or it was something for her daughters because they had homecoming that week. But I remember telling her that this story made me kind of salty because explain to me why 2 people died of tuberculosis before this. Actually, 3. 3 people in this family died. Mary Eliza, Mary Olive, and Mercy Lena. But when Edwin, the boy, is sick, they're like, it's a vampire. Their dad's like, it's a vampire. I'm like, you didn't want to don't dig up graves, but you didn't want to look into it whenever your wife and then your child and then your other child was dying. Okay, cool, great. So, as we know now, obviously her body was not quote unquote preserved in that way because she was a vampire. It was because it was so gosh darn cold. Whenever she had first passed away, the ground was still so frozen that they couldn't bury her, so she was kept in a crypt. And obviously in Rhode Island in the winter, it's cold as all heck. So even in her little above ground crypt, she was still frozen. And so that's what preserved her. And of course, we also know that when you die, your fingernails and your hair look like they're growing, but they are not because your body just shrinks and shrivels. And also the quote unquote blood in her heart was just, it wasn't actually blood. It's just, gross ick that your body creates when it is being broken down by its natural process. So they just gave him rotten heart. They just burned a rotten heart and said, drink it. But the thing is,
For science.
all over. I mean, all over. Yeah, because for science, exactly. Like here, it's gonna make you feel better. Like great. All over New England, though. Like she is considered the last vampire of New England, of the New England vampire panic. Her story was the one that became the most famous at the time because everybody's like, oh my gosh, what are these people in the farms doing? Why are they digging people up? Why are they burning hearts? They
Why
were
are they
genuinely
drinking ashes?
Yes, they were concerned. The rest of the United States was concerned about this. Got into the papers, and I can't remember. I think I might have written it down, but they were literally saying things like, "What are these backcountry people doing?" It ended up because it became so big in the rest of the United States, it ended up becoming much larger in the rest of the world because they were like, "What are these Americans doing? What is wrong with them?" And some people say, and there's not anything to actually back this, but there are whispers that her story is actually what inspired Dracula, since it was written a few years after. There's nothing, actually saying it is what inspired it, but it's an interesting thought. And her exhumation, again, it's one of the last ones of New England, but you can find, especially in Connecticut, there was another one that was dug up recently, I think back in 2019, of a grave where they had dug it up. They dug up the body because there were these kids playing out in like a meadow or on a hill or something. This kid found a skull and went back and told his mom, and she's like, no, that's not real. And then he actually showed her the skull, and she was like, yeah, wow, that's a skull. And so they ended up digging up the area, found it was a site because there was a lot of historical coffins. And so then, they're doing their excavation, and this body was buried. Its feet were normal, like the bottom half of its body was somewhat normal, but they had cut off his skull and placed it on his lap and then crossed his thigh bones, like the Jolly Rogers symbol is exactly what it looked like.
I saw that. Yeah, it was almost like a pirate thing.
Yep. And so that's actually what they would do is they would, if they thought, somebody's dying from tuberculosis and they thought that somebody was a vampire, they would go and exhume the body. And if it looked like it was fresh enough, or if they just had enough suspicion, depending on where you were at, what they would do with the body would change. Sometimes they would, like they did with Mercy, they would burn the heart. Sometimes they would burn the heart and liver. Sometimes it was just the family that would do it. It was just like the family, maybe a few close neighbors. Sometimes they made it an entire thing where like the entire little town would sit there and watch them burn the heart or liver of this supposed vampire. And sometimes it was just dig him up, cut him up, and put him back.
Imagine if we did that today. What kind of imagine if we did this during COVID. Like imagine let's just go take him out back and burn him.
Take him out back and burn him. You got put down now. You got the COVID.
Throw him in the fire pit.
I'm not spreading the COVID.
Not spreading the COVIDs. Got the COVID.
Yeah, so there you go. America has its own vampire. Vampires are not all in Transylvania and Europe. They're not all proper with their accents.
They're not all
sometimes
aristocrats.
they're not all aristocrats. Sometimes they just sound like us Americans.
I'm gonna share the versions that are not. You know that.
So there you go. There's my spooky story.
Thank you for your spooky story.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome. This story about the vampires and the backcountry of Android using Rhode Island.
Yes.
We may get some Android haters.
I think I'm going to get some hate from hating so much on androids.
It's okay. I'm there for them, for all the Android people.
Yeah. Catherine's here for you.
Can't turn me.
How
Yeah.
many people can be like,
All right.
I can't follow this lady. She doesn't like androids.
So there are still cultures who believe vampires are still very real. And when you were talking about the burning of the heart and drinking of the ashes, that actually has happened in the past at least 20 years. And if it still happens technically over in Romania. That's still a thing.
No offense, Romanians, but no.
They take the heart and they burn it and they drink it so that the vampire no longer follows them.
You doing a little ash tea
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
with your
You look
breakfast?
a little
Good Lord.
ashy today. Have you had
You're looking a little ashy today. Would you like more? Would you like more ashes?
But I mean, so Catherine touched on, Christianity, and Christianity, yes, there's mention in the scriptures of these creatures, but Christians literally drink wine during communion
Mm-hmm.
as a symbol of Jesus's immortal blood that will essentially give them eternal life, that immortality that they're seeking. Unless you're a Catholic and you drink the literal blood of Christ because of transubstantiation. And that is that's like the literal changing of the wine into Christ's blood. So when you take communion as a Catholic, you're drinking the blood of Christ, that it changes. Fun fact.
That is interesting. Dang. What if they have white wine?
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Okay, I know this is a really ridiculous question, but genuinely, do they have like a specific
Yeah,
kind?
I think I have a specific. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have a red. They do a light red. No, I'm just kidding.
Red, yeah. Interesting. So
It's a bold red because it's for eternity.
so in other communions, they're drinking the wine as a symbol of Christ's
Correct.
blood, whereas in Catholicism, they believe that it really does become Christ's blood when they
Correct.
consume. Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
like that.
and the wafer is the flesh, so you're eating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay.
But as for vampires, let's go to in Romania. Like I said, they still have a very real fear. But let's see about like these more about these physical creatures. I want to talk more about some
Demons?
of the demons. What did you say?
I said
you
the
say
demons,
The
the
demons?
soul sucking squad.
Yes, the soul sucking squad. Yes. Yeah. For me, I always feel like there's a method to the dark madness. If the physical creatures are what people are reporting, there's always something dark behind the veil. And so therefore, I wanted to kind of go down the far Mesopotamia, the demons that may have been lingering in the shadows, preying on the life forces of humans. So the vampire ideology has this prehistoric merging. Like it's kind of emerged before people were really writing anything, long before Dracula, long before Nicholas Rider. But like many things, they were known by other entities first. There are a lot of creatures that have vampire-like characteristics that are throughout widespread cultures. Like Catherine had even mentioned that like a lot of religions have a lot of these bloodsuckers. Some of them look like creature-like, some are different like hybrid versions of creatures. Some are even like headless women with like entrails, like they're just very interesting creatures.
That's just gross.
But Catherine and Willow, I know you both have listened to the previous episode. Do you remember the mention of the discussion we had about Lamashtu and Lilitu from Mesopotamia?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit concerned about where you're about to take this. There's only one route you could go that I'd be okay with, and we're going to see if you take that route.
I mean, you're probably not going to be okay then. So, Lamashtu is the lion-headed demon with the claws known for like the miscarriages and the targeting pregnant women.
Multiple breasts, right?
Yes.
Was that one? Okay.
Yes.
Anyway.
And then Lilitu, that's the other. She's older. She's the older demon. She's more seductive. She's winged. She's that night demon who's kind of associated with a lot of the sexual stuff and the nightmares and like. But she's also kind of tied into infant mortality too. But these ladies kind of are back this week to talk about their thirst for blood.
Yay.
Great.
And Lilith does make
An appearance.
a cameo in my
cameo.
book. Yeah, she comes in, so
I love that. So yeah, so she's one of my muses as well. Oh, yeah.
Chris is like, she's my bestie.
She's like my best friend. She's a demon, but it's okay.
Okay, don't judge.
She's
No.
extremely
It's okay.
misunderstood. People don't understand. Like she had so much pressure and maybe she didn't consent to be an Adam's wife.
she's the victim here.
Right? She's hashtag
I will
Lilith.
believe it. Hashtag save Lilith.
I feel like we're gonna I'm gonna take you down this chilling evolution of the vampires from their earliest mythology to the modern bloodsuckers that we know and love today.
That we know.
The stories begin in ancient Mesopotamia, where Lilitu, which I said is my muse, she has haunted the night. These are, again, the female winged demons, and they are kind of mentioned as early back as like 3000 BC. And they are found in both Sumerian and Akkadian cultures. She is that demon that's known for life draining energy. She, takes the men's seed and like she takes all their breath from their life, almost like kind of like vampirism in a sense, when it's like being able to get into their mind.
Yeah.
She also has the characteristic of being a shape-shifting, where, we find later in vampires with a flight and stuff like that we see.
Shapeshifters.
What is it?
Shapeshifters.
Yes, because I said, so maybe Lilitu is the one who taught the Yinagalushi how to shapeshift.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, from the
I
Navajos.
really don't like that I keep making these connections.
Yes.
Actually,
Yes. Yeah, we keep coming full circle with these demonic bullies.
I know.
She was so Lilith was obviously rebellious. She was immortal. And so her refusal to die and submit to like a lot of the Jewish lore kind of parallels with how vampires are cursed and they have that eternal life. So there's that. But Lilith's, her seductive nature, her nocturnal traits, these are all bleeding into the fiction, like Catherine had said, which Carmilla is a good example of this. Lilith has a good parallel to that one, along with Interview with the Vampire. There's that high sexual energy that's in that. Of course, Twilight, and we know that there's sex happening in the Solus series.
Yep,
So, yep.
that happens.
Yeah, so there's that legacy. That legacy of Lilith
That
is bleeding
happens
in.
indeed.
That happens.
She's like, so unlike later vampires, there were these spirits, these ethereal yet deadly, they're embodying humanity's fear of these unseen forces that they kept seeing in the darkness. A lot of this was at night. You got to remember, a lot of things that happen that are in the Vale are nighttime. So by the Babylonian era, this is about 1800 BC, we get that more grotesque figure that we were talking about, the one that the Lamashtu. So yeah, Lamashtu's less seductive. She's kind of like the ugly best friend. Like, we just bring her along.
We just
Yeah.
bring her along.
Yeah, more monstrous, more, yeah. And depicted sometimes with those gnarly teeth, like the lion head, things like that. But the thing with Lamashtu is this is the kind of the quintessential prototype vampire demon. This one is blood drinking. She's said to suck the blood from infants, feast on their flesh, and this is obviously mirroring vampires.
Yeah, that's
know?
fine,
Yeah. Nocturnal. So these things happen at night like vampires, striking at night, targeting the vulnerable. Of course, has the immortality, which, demonic nature 101. You have this undying threat to people, like you're not going away. Like you're not going to just outlive your person, or you're not going to outlive your
person.
I'm just going to outlive my demon. He's like got 7 years. It's fine.
He only has 7 years left, guys. I'm doing great.
Yeah. It's like, what are demon years?
Don't break a mirror. You get 7 years with a demon.
So Lamashtu's role was more physical, life draining, and may have influenced more of like what we hear with like the Strigoi and like the vampire in the legends and stuff that we hear in like Eastern Europe. So those are kind of like what happens there is there's like this blending of features. We've talked about that in the last episode, how they evolve and characteristics kind of like, oh, this happened here. So who's to say there's not these two females behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, pulling the entrails of the demonic vampire legends.
I mean, that's so interesting too, though, that the first, I guess, yeah, essentially the first known original vampire, shall we say, that has most of the similar characteristics that we have derived to create the more modern vampire was a woman. And then whenever vampires as a
sex symbol.
Yeah, I was trying to find like the right word to use, but like when they came more into literature and such, of course, I think that really started with Carmilla and with Dracula. Then it became a man. It was mostly like, oh, men are vampires, and I read a series, it was one of my favorite series, the Parasol Protectorate, and it takes place in Victorian England. And it's got a supernatural society. So they've got werewolves and vampires and ghosts and a preternatural and whatnot. And in their like theory, more or less, is that most supernaturals are men, but they have to use like a female or a rare female to breed more supernaturals. So for the vampires, they would live in hives. You'd have a queen and she'd be able to breed more vampires, but it was very unlikely that she'd be able to breed a female or another queen. It was pretty much just men. I just find that interesting. That's a thing.
That is the theme in my book with the werewolves specific, though. That with my werewolves, they have, if it's a werewolf and a human that have a child, they have a 50-50 chance of becoming a werewolf later. They only have a 100% chance if it's 2 werewolves, but to have a werewolf female is uncommon. It's less likely. So they kind of protect their ladies and want their women to marry werewolf men.
So does that mean that men are just easily cursed?
I think it means they're a dime a dozen.
That's true.
1 female werewolf to 5 male werewolves.
Exactly. Literally. She can just whatever.
The pick of the litter.
Right. Yes. So these 2 like Mesopotamian demons spread their whole demonology kind of spread westward through. There was a lot of trade, there was a lot of conquest. So this kind of started influencing a lot of early Hebrew and Greek lore that we'll find. And as we kind of journey down these shadowy crossroads into the ancient demons, there's a transformation into the vampires we know. And let me kind of give you that picture. So, Mediterranean world, about 800 to about 500 BC, or no, 800 BC to about 500 AD. Sorry. I was like, I think I typed that wrong. So you have this cauldron of myth and terror. We've got all this kind of stewing. We've got the resurrections. We've got these healers. We've got people doing miracles. We've got all these things going on in all these, different religions and stuff across the world. But you have all this kind of like bubbling up, and the Greek horrors, like what was the one, Impusa with the bronze leg? You've got these shape-shifting tricks, what we've heard about. You've got all these people, or these lores of people devour, or these entities that devour children. All these monstrosity stories are starting to kind of come into people's nightmares. And therefore, the things that give them nightmares are also growing and creating new faces, which we talked about last time. Then came the Strix, those eerie owl-like creatures from the Roman legend that swooped in from the darkness to drink human blood. These weren't like just stories. These were like warnings, kind of like the Mothman that whispered by firelight and carried these Roman soldiers and these merchants. It kind of like spread through the European folklore.
Yeah, and
And
don't we also have across the world in the Americas, where we are, Carissa, in Florida, they had the Stikini,
Mhm.
which was the owl creature, where if you
Yep.
vomit up your organs and your soul and become an owl creature that searches
Yep.
for hearts. That's
Yep.
scarily interesting.
Yes. Yeah. But then, I mean, you've got all these things happening. You've got all these myths. You've got all these darkness. And then all of a sudden, Christianity arises. The church takes these pagan phantoms and kind of rebrands them as soldiers of Satan. And then the Jewish tradition of Lilith. All these things are kind of like spinning around, and no one has the internet to compare stories or fact check anything.
They don't have the
So
Wi-Fi either.
yeah. You've got these dead people that apparently are refused to be buried. No, you got Jesus resurrecting. I mean, hello, that's Vampire 101.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus was actually a vampire.
He's asking
Yeah,
us to drink his blood. Jeez.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Like, I follow the vampire. Maybe you know what? That might be a new trend to get people to follow Jesus. He's actually a vampire, guys.
Actually a vampire. That's how yeah.
We can make
He
more.
actually does have eternal life. We don't even know who he is anymore. He's wandering around here somewhere, just hanging out, watching the world.
Oh, because all this stuff is happening. Like, there's all these different kind of things going on. So I'm kind of the key is I'm painting this picture like you've got this happening over here, you got these monsters here, you got like children eating things, you got later on you got the tooth fairy happening that we're going to talk about later, and in the next episode. But you've got all these crazy dark things happening,
Mhm.
and in the midst of these things, this shrouded village in like the Slavic lands, there's this vampire that crawls from the grave, no longer a spirit, but a stinking bloated corpse with like ruddy skin and its flesh just dripping from its lips. These plagued years made these horrors feel so real. These people, I mean, did not know what was going on. When villages were dying and people would see the undead in these half decomposed bodies, not understanding how a body decomposes. First of all, why are they exhuming graves anyways? Why are y'all going in there being curious? Why do you want to
I
go
know.
poke the bear?
Leave
Like,
them be.
right?
Let them rot. They
What
aren't
happened to
doing
RIP?
anything.
Hashtag RIP. Like, why are
Yeah.
we not doing that?
They're not doing anything but rotting. Let
Yeah.
them rot.
Yeah, so a lot of time those stomach gases and they weren't embalming back then. So there was these stomach gases and all these awful smells, the like you had talked like the facial hairs and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is where the rituals began of staking, decapitation, burning, like the ashes, all that stuff. This is kind of echoing the ancient Mesopotamia bindings and the crosses and the holy water that came from Christianity. They're like pulling, like, what are these people doing? Like, what are you doing with your resurrected God? Like, what are we doing here?
What are you doing? Why is he back?
Yeah.
That is wrong.
Yeah, how did you kill your god? You put him on a stake? Okay, let me give me a wooden stake.
Give me one too, because I got more bodies.
So by the 18th century, the panic erupts into official records. And these are things that were historically in record. And in current times, archaeologically, they have found graves recently in the thousands, like where graves are dug up and there are stakes inside there. This was a really fear for people when you have corpses that have been like, or skeletons that have stakes like driven through them.
Yeah, and part of you said about the stomach gases and things. part of them not understanding the process of decay. There's reports where they'll do an exhumation and they'll stake the person and they make an audible groan. And it's probably just some of the pressure releasing, but they don't know that. And if I didn't know that, that would solidify to me like, oh, this is alive. This that I just
Oh,
stabbed
yeah.
a living
Oh, yeah.
creature. So
I mean, this is a kind of a gory story, but you're listening to Parallax Podcast. I don't know what to tell you.
yeah.
But so my parents are, and we're both veterinarians. My mom used to be a wildlife rehabilitator. And there was one time where she had saved this goose. We had to amputate its little foot because something had happened to its foot. It was horribly infected. And so we're going to amputate it. And then once it healed, send it off to live in a sanctuary where it could live the rest of its life, even without its little foot. Ended up passing away. We're pretty sure it was probably just septic by the time we got to it, so it was just too late. But then Mom was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do a necropsy because I can learn a lot from this. I can learn a lot about their physiology and whatnot. And I was like, all right, cool, I'm going to watch because I'm morbidly fascinated. And that was how I learned that after you have passed away, if you've passed away recently, it's how it is in pretty much everything. Even if you are dead as a doornail, you will still have a few electrical signals that'll every once in a while send to your heart, and it will just kind of jiggle. It won't exactly beat, but it's just your muscles, the last electrical signals going out, and your muscles just kind of being like, oh, we're dead. Okay. And so my mom had this goose that she was doing her necropsy on. She had it cut open. She's looking through everything. And all of a sudden its little heart went jiggle, jiggle. And I was like, you just cut open a goose and it's not dead. I said, Mom, it's not dead. And she's like, oh, it's very dead. I said, but Mom, its heart moved. So for me, that was very, very scary. And it makes sense how someone who hasn't seen that before would sit there and say, wait, that's not dead, because our perception of something that should no longer be alive is something that is not moving, is not making noise, and is not showing any signs of active life.
Yeah, definitely. That would convince me, especially if I was a little kid.
So there's my nice gory story. I gave you a gory story and a spooky story. I have you all set up for Halloween now.
Well, and so like during the 18th century stuff, I mean, there was like a soldier who was alleged of vampirism, and it led to like mass exhumations. Like people were just like, oh, we got to go make sure there's not like he's not feeding on them. Like what? Like this is where people started burying vampires with bricks in their mouths and stakes in their heart. Like they started a whole different process of burying their dead, and it just it kind of grew into this whole like hysteria.
Yeah, mass hysteria
Heck,
is...
even if you were suspected in the living, like if you were suspected in the living and you didn't have tuberculosis technically, maybe you were just had some deformities, or you had just different things. Like we talked before, how people perceived witches and what made a witch is different than what, you would technically consider a witch. Just because someone's going through menopause makes them have
I'm a witch, yeah.
makes them a witch. But these cases inspired a lot of Gothic writers, like Katherine had mentioned as well. So this kind of gave the birth of the modern vampire. That, the vampire, the Varney the vampire, the Carmilla, the Dracula, these vampires became more sophisticated, more seductive, tragic. There was these things, but it kept these same themes. One, they had to be dead, or they had to be the undead, I should say. There's
Mostly dead.
Mostly dead, yes. These themes of immortality that draw people in, this sexuality, this corruption that emerge, but like we're drawn to it. It's so crazy that it's like so dark, and people had real fears, and all of a sudden we're like, like I cannot wait till the next vampire movie comes out. This is great.
This is the skin of a killer, Bella.
Yes. And like Nosferatu, we've got like all these, like you had mentioned Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, and we talked about that one. It's reimagining these vampires. So the idea, like when you're looking back at the lore and the origins, came from these dark, shadowy night demons who preyed on you in your vulnerable state. And then with a combination of lack of knowledge of what certain diseases and certain plagues were at the same time. So there was always like what you're seeing in your dreams, and then what you're seeing, you're imagining worst case scenario. And so I thought, for me, I wanted to kind of sum this up with, yes, I love my Mesopotamian demons, but I wanted to share something that I find is in modern time that's pretty cool, that you can kind of go down a little rabbit hole. There is a place called Vampire Island. Have you heard of this?
I mean, I don't think so, but maybe.
Okay. where we were talking about how they have found some burial grounds now that have people that have had stakes in them. A lot of these are near Greece. There's an island off adjacent of Mytilene. It's kind of like, here's Greece, it's like a little island there. They found a journal of Charles Thomas Newton. He was a travel art author, 1860, and he was also the British vice consulate, which means he was respected. He wasn't some like random person. He was talking about in his journals of this island that contained a whole vampire cemetery where they would basically come to life and, whatever. But it was surrounded by salt water, and they were taken there so that way they couldn't cross the water and come to humans. This island from above, I watched a video on YouTube about it, and the island from above is literally like you can see where there were actual like foundations of things there, but it's like all flattened now. There's nothing on it, but I found that to be pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah. And then, of course, no offense, but there are some people out there, we know that mental illness is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in New Orleans that he claims to be a vampire in modern day. But get this. So kind of like when we were talking about possession, I'm like, is it like this self-proclamation that you're a vampire that makes you not a vampire? You know what I mean? It's like they really can't tell you that they're a vampire because obviously that's breaking the code.
Exactly. So if you say you're a vampire, obviously
You're not a vampire. Yeah.
You are incorrect.
Yes. But we also know that, they're dead, but this guy proclaimed, like, I literally watched this video. I had to turn it off. This guy was literally biting someone to draw blood to pull out and drink his blood. He's like, if I don't drink blood, I actually started noticing a difference in myself. But they asked him questions, and he's like, oh no, I follow modern laws of humans, so he can have garlic. He can cross salt water. He can, and he says that anything that gets stabbed with a stake is gonna die. I'm like,
Yeah, no
you
kidding.
just drink blood. You're not a vampire.
You're not a vampire. All you do is drink blood, brother. Brother. That's not what makes you a vampire.
But anyways, so the basic story of where vampires came from before they became the trendy dark souls that we know came from two dark female entities in the demon realm.
Because actually, women run the world, and y'all just aren't ready for that conversation.
Right? Yes. So actually, I swear I had another fun fact about Lilith. Oh no,
Your bestie?
that's in the next episode.
I thought I was your bestie.
You're my bestie.
Thank you.
In the human world?
In the human world, you're my bestie. Only when we're alive, though, okay? When you die, you're on your own.
You're on your own when you pass through this mortal plane, okay?
Jeez, yeah, apparently that's what I think about that.
Well, I want to thank Katherine for coming on, but I also want to make sure that people can find her books about vampires, her fictional vampires about Nicholas Rider and his journey through all these different eras. Yeah, so you guys can follow Katherine. It's Katherine Horsley, the author, on Facebook, and Katherine is
Follow
with a K.
her. Be like me.
Yes, be like us. Follow Katherine. Yes, and you can find her also at Vendera Publishing. You can get her on Amazon. She's on Kindle. You can get print books. But if you have any more questions and you would like for us to send them to Katherine, you can email us at info@theparallaxpodcast.com. Or you can go to our website, theparallaxpodcast.com, and you can reach out to us through either of those icons on social media with Facebook and Instagram. So until then, I'm Karissa.
And I'm Willow.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye, mortals.